average and relative speed and velocity. In this module, you will learn about the average, instantaneous, and relative speed and velocity. In everyday life, due to a series of changes like a traffic signal, turns, and so on, the car you travel in undergoes a non-uniform motion. To understand such a non-uniform motion, the concept of average, instantaneous, and relative speed and velocity. Average speed is the quantity that defines the ratio between the total distance an object travels and the total time it takes to cover the distance. While average velocity measures the change in position of the object in the total time spent along a specific direction. Speed is independent of direction. If the body is moving along the same direction, the magnitude of the average velocity and the average speed is equal. Average speed is always positive and usually greater than the average velocity of the object. In other words, the average velocity can be uniform if its magnitude at regular time intervals is the same. Average velocity can be positive, zero, or negative depending on the change in direction of the moving object. The determination of velocity of a moving object at a particular instant of time is difficult. For this purpose, you define instantaneous velocity. Instantaneous velocity is the measure of an object's average velocity when the time interval is infinitesimally small or approaches zero, and it can be considered uniform at this particular instant of time. Now, you will learn about the concept of relative velocity. Relative velocity is a quantity which describes the motion of an object relative to another. Relative velocity may increase, decrease, or be zero depending on the relative motion of the two bodies. You can understand it by considering two moving objects coming towards each other. In this case, the relative velocity of the objects is the sum of their individual velocities. Even if the objects are going away from each other, then too their relative velocity is the sum of their individual velocities. Thus, the relative velocity of the objects moving in opposite directions is the sum of their individual velocities. This also implies that the relative velocity for two bodies moving opposite to each other is always greater than their individual velocities. Now, consider the case of two objects moving in the same direction with different velocities. In such a case, the relative velocity of the objects is the difference of their individual velocities. In a similar way, the relative velocity of two objects moving in the same direction with equal velocities is zero, and thus the objects seem stationary to each other. Thus, you see that the relative velocity of any two objects moving in the same direction is always less than their individual velocities. In this module you have learned average speed is the ratio between the total distance an object travels and the total time it takes to cover that distance. Average velocity measures the change in the position of an object in the total time spent along a specific direction. Instantaneous velocity is the measure of an object's average velocity when the time interval is infinitesimally small. Relative velocity is a quantity which describes the motion of an object relative to another.